loosely at his sides. Dark eyes fixed ahead with a cold emptiness. His chiseled face bore no expression, but the subtle tick in his jaw said enough. Beside him, Mrs. Kim sat with her back straight and her lips curled in disapproval. Her eyes sharp and judgmental, glanced every now and then toward the dining room. "Your wife is a complete disaster." Mrs. Kim began, the venom in her voice far from subtle. "First dinner and she shattered half the kitchen. Who drops 3 glasses in one go? Was she raised in a barn?" Tim didn't flinch. He continued to stare ahead as though her words bounced off an invisible wall. "She's clumsy, unfit, completely unsuitable for someone like you. You will see your theme. She's a walking mess. Have you seen the way she stutters in front of guests?" His jaw tightened as Mrs. Kim continued. "She's ruining your image. People are starting to whisper." Tim turned his voice low and cut him like a blade. "That's enough. How much venom do you still have for wine?" Mrs. Kim faltered, her lips parted slightly in shock. He continued, tone sharp and cold. "If you have finished your meal and voiced your judgments, the door is right there. You have already eaten more than enough in this house." Mrs. Kim's eyes widened, her pride wounded as she asked in shock, "Are you throwing your mother out?" His reply came like a gust of ice. "You understood that correctly." Mrs. Kim gritted her teeth and asked, "You are letting her come between us?" He glanced at her coldly. "No, you're coming between us for no reason. She didn't come after me." Tim said, his voice low but heavy with restrained bitterness. "You brought her into my life, you and this family. And I'll say it once, however she is, I'm happy with her. I love the way she is. That makes her different than every other girl." Mrs. Kim was left speechless, lips twitching as she tried to come up with a retort. But the sound of footsteps interrupted the storm brewing. Wine walked in nervously, holding a tray of tea with trembling hands. Her eyes flicked between the two of them, tension hitting her like a slap. She tried to stay steady, biting her lip, determined not to mess anything up. But as fate would have it, her foot caught the corner of the carpet. The tray shook violently in her hands, though she managed to steady herself just in time. Mrs. Kim scoffed loudly, unscolded. "Of course, she can't even walk straight." Tim's jaw clenched as he stood abruptly. "Wine, give it to me." She shook her head softly, her eyes darting toward Mrs. Kim. "No, it's okay, I can do it." He noticed how her shoulders tensed, how she avoided his mother's glare like a frightened child. He could see it, the fear she carried every time his mother was near. His hands twisted at his sides. Wine knelt in front of the table, carefully placing the tray before Mrs. Kim. But as she stood up, her knee hit the table edge. One of the teacups wobbled and spilled the tea cascading onto her hand and soaking the linen. Mrs. Kim shot up instantly. "Unbelievable. This is the kind of girl I choose for you," she cursed. "I'm sorry," Wine whispered, grabbing a napkin, her fingers trembling as she tried to clean the spill. Before she could wipe more, a firm hand grasped her wrist. Then took the napkin from her, his tone unshakable. "That's enough." He knelt before her, gently dabbing her reddened skin with the cloth. His fingers were careful, his movements tender. "You burnt your hand." "It's fine," she muttered, trying to pull her hand back. "The tea wasn't that hot." "Are you sure?" His eyes searched her face, his voice quieter, strained. She nodded, looking down, not meeting his gaze. If only she had, she would have seen the fiery trembling just beneath his carefully controlled facade. Not at her, but for her. "She's pitiful." Mrs. Kim muttered behind them. "You have made this house childproof because of her, haven't you? What kind of man sacrifices his dignity for a clumsy little fool?" Then stood, his voice suddenly a low, dangerous growl. "Enough." Mrs. Kim's brow rose. "She's my wife. You'll tolerate every part of her without a word." Wine flinched at the harshness in his voice, mistaking it for irritation at her. She stood quickly, her hands slipping from his as she blinked back her tears. He noticed her flinching and said, "Go to the room, Wine." She walked away quickly, shoulders shaking as she disappeared down the hallway. She didn't see Tim turn back to his mother, eyes ablaze with cold fury, and muttered, "Never talk to her like that again." Mrs. Kim glared at him and said, "She embarrassed you." He shook his head, saying, "No, you did." She clenched her jaw and shot back, "You're defending her." Then sighed, showing his hands into his pockets, and mumbled, "She's my wife. That means something to me." Mrs. Kim stared at him in disbelief. This wasn't the Tim she knew. "She's clumsy. I should have married you to someone elegant." His cold glare almost froze her as he said, "Elegance doesn't matter when I already married someone irreplaceable." She opened her mouth to speak, but he interrupted, his voice razor's edge. "If you insult my wife again, you won't be welcome in this house again. I'll forget you're my mother." Mrs. Kim gasped. "You can't possibly care for that useless girl." His next words were barely a whisper, wrinkled in their clarity. "Try me." He pointed toward the door, out. Mrs. Kim scoffed, fuming, but didn't argue further. With a dramatic huff, she grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Ham sighed, raking a hand through his dark hair, frustration simmering beneath his skin. He called the maid to clean up the mess before walking quietly into the bedroom. It was empty. He sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. The weight in his chest felt heavier than ever. He didn't mean to scare her, but she always seemed to shrink away after everything, as if she believed she deserved the hatred, as if she thought she had ruined him. He lay down on the bed, one arm draped over his eyes, exhaustion catching up to him. Minutes passed, the storm in the house dying down into silence. Wine stepped inside slowly, her fingers playing nervously with the hem of her shirt. She found him asleep, one arm sprawled over the pillow, his breathing slow and deep. She quietly slipped under the blanket, lying on the far edge of the bed, facing his back. Her eyes welled with unshed tears as she stared at the shape of his shoulder blades, thinking, "He must hate me now. I ruined everything. Even today he defended me just to save his face." Just as her breath hissed, Then stared, half asleep, he rolled over, instinctively his arm sliding around her waist and pulling her flesh against him. His face buried itself in her hair as a low sigh escaped him. Wine froze, heart thundering in her chest. Was he still asleep or did he know? She couldn't tell. But her hand rose shakily and gently threaded through his soft hair, brushing it back as her eyes fluttered shut, as always finding her peace and comfort in his arms. Few days later, it had been days since the incident with his mother, but the silence that followed was not the comforting kind. Wine had retreated into herself, soft-spoken, distant, and always cautious around him, as if she feared that a single glance would shatter whatever fragile thread held them together. Tim noticed. She no longer looked him in the eye, she no longer hung quietly around the kitchen or asked if he needed sugar in his coffee. She barely entered a room if she knew he was there. Her steps had grown timid, her laughter muted, and every time she did smile, it was never around him, and that, more than anything, made him ache. Now he stepped out of the bedroom with his laptop under his arm. He was greeted by the sight of Wine in the living room sitting on the sofa, knees drawn up, an iPad covering half her face. Earphones stuck into her ears, her eyes were glued to the screen, wide and amused. Sam took a seat beside her, wordless, and placed his laptop on the table. He didn't say a thing, just clicked his Bluetooth headset into his ear and opened his documents. Wine had frozen. She paused the movie, the screen displaying the bright and chaotic world of Cap of Demon Hunters, and slowly peeked from behind the iPad. Her eyes met his and her heart jumped. She mumbled, pulling her earphones out and setting the iPad aside. I'll go, you must need the space. But as she began to stand, a gentle hand wrapped around her wrist. I won't take you. Sam said softly, almost playfully, without looking up from his screen, Wine blinked, lips parting in surprise. His tone wasn't cold. It was light, dryly teasing. She slowly sat back, still on edge. Okay. She hesitated a moment, then resumed the movie, then snuck glances between his slides and her face as the animation played. She giggled at the scene, eyes sparkling, whispering small comments to herself as if no one else was around. And every time she did, Sam's lips twitched in an unspoken smile. Wine leaned back on the sofa, iPad held above her face. She was immersed, whispering, no, don't go in there. To the one of the animated characters, the iPad slipped with a loud thud. It landed squarely on her face. She gasped, clutching her nose. Sam, who had been in the middle of an online meeting, held up a hand to the camera. One moment. He turned immediately, his voice concerned. Wine. She sat up abruptly, mortified, rubbing her nose as she mumbled, sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you. I dropped it. Please go on with your meeting. Sam stared at her for a moment, expression unreadable. Then he simply gave a soft nod and turned back to his screen. Wine returned to her movie, cheeks red and eyes a little watery from embarrassment. But slowly comfort crept back into her lips. The laughter returned, her head tilted with curiosity. During dramatic moments, she leaned into the cushions and slowly her eyes grew heavier. She kept aside the iPad and stared at Tim's tight profile. The way his lips moved, his hands worked, his cold gaze fixed on the screen, his jaw muscles flexed, and she felt cool to him. Tim could feel her constant gaze on him. Then in a daze, Wine leaned and brushed her fingers against his cheek. He froze as she caressed his jaw, bringing her face close to his, but she suddenly slumped against him, snapping out of the daze. Sam held her gently while she stared at him dumbfounded. When her gaze landed on the laptop screen where in the meeting room everyone was gawking at them curiously. Swan gasped, moving away and groaned, covering her face in her hands, but Sam shook his head, hiding his smile, and continued his work to not embarrass her. Moments later, her head slipped to the side onto his shoulder. Sam paused mid-sentence, glancing at her. Her breathing was soft and even, her lashes fanned across her cheeks. Lips parted slightly in slumber. His eyes followed the slow way her head was slumped lower, sliding from his shoulder into his lap. He froze. Everyone in the meeting stared once more. Mr. Kim, someone asked, are we continuing? Tim blinked and cleared his throat. Continue without the presentation, just a few points. With one hand gently cradling Wine's head, he adjusted her, careful not to wake her. His other hand moved the cursor. After wrapping up, he shut the laptop and took off his headset. The room fell into sudden silence. He looked down again, Wine head cooled slightly. Arms stuck beneath her face, resting comfortably on his lap. She was glowing, like the calm after rain. His eyes softened. Then leaned down slowly, lips brushing her nose in the gentlest of kisses. She wrinkled her nose and turned instinctively, nuzzling into his stomach, her cheek brushing against his shirt. He held perfectly still, holding his breath as not to disturb the delicate moment. His hand hovered, then settled on her hair, stroking it lightly. She didn't move. Time passed, sunlight slanted through the curtains, and then stayed there, watching her. Time skipped. Wine clutched the file tightly to her chest, the elevator humming softly as it climbed to the top floor of Kim Corporation. Her heart beat fast. She had been careful not to crease the edges, smoothing the surface again and again with her fingers. Tim had tested her just 20 minutes ago, asking her to bring the presentation file he had left at home. Urgent, please bring it to the office top drawer of my desk, thank you. Simple words, but they had sent her into a whirlwind. She had just quickly tied her hair into a neat bun and taken a cab. Now standing in front of the CEO's office, she hesitated a second before knocking gently. Come in, came his deep, distracted voice from the other side. She stepped in carefully, her footsteps soft on the polished floor. The office was expansive, sleek and intimidating, just like the man sitting behind the white mahogany desk, typing furiously on the laptop. His brows were furrowed in concentration, his sharp jaw clenched as his silver watch glinted under the overhead light. His secretary, who stood nearby holding a tablet, gave Wine a tight-lipped glance that barely masked her disdain. Her eyes raked over Wine's simple clothes, her plain shoes, and scoffed silently. Wine swallowed the discomfort building in her throat and quietly walked over to the desk. "Here's the file," she said softly, setting it down. Him finally looked up, eyes meeting hers for a moment. Something in him softened. "Thank you," he said. Then he turned to the secretary. "Go through the contents and confirm the projections. Also, check the main conference room is ready." "Yes, Mr. Kim," the secretary said curtly, barely hiding her irritation as she gave Wine another cold glare. Wine gave a polite, awkward smile and turned to leave. She didn't belong here. The tension in the room felt like a cold gust of wind pushing her out. But just as her hand touched the door handle, Wine Clem's voice called. She turned around slowly. "It's hot out there. Don't go home yet," he said. "Wait for me in the office. It won't take long." Before she could answer, the secretary walked out, clearly biting her tongue. Wine watched her leave, then said quietly, "It's okay, I should just go." But before she could turn again, Hem crossed the room in a few strides, gently grabbing her hand. His fingers were warm and steady. "You came all the way here for me," he said. "At least sit." He guided her to his own revolving chair, pushing it gently as she sat. "You can order anything you want. Use the landline. Tell the kitchen." Wine nodded with her head lowered, her fingers curling around the edge of the seat. She didn't say anything, and Hem sighed. He watched her for a moment. A simple, soft-hearted wife, folding herself smaller in a space that should have been hers too. "Why won't she look at me? Why does she still walk like a shadow in my life when all I want is for her to shine?" He couldn't help but think, "I'll be back," he said gently and left the office. The room was quiet now. Wine sat back in his chair, her fingers unconsciously grazing the leather arms warm from where his hand had just been. It smelled faintly like his cologne. She let her head rest against the back and closed her eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply. A small soft smile tapped at her lips. She opened her eyes and leaned forward to the corner of his desk. There in a silver frame was a picture of him in a black tuxedo. Looking away from the camera, serious and godlike, elegant, intimidating and untouchably handsome, her heart fluttered. Even his office made her nervous, let alone the man who commanded it. She picked up the photo frame, holding it close to her chest, her eyes scanning the bookshelves, the certificates, the models. Every part of this place screamed him, polished, powerful, proud. What am I even doing here? She thought, hugging the frame tighter for a second. Carefully setting it back, she stood and strolled slowly to the bookshelves. She took down a thick hardback and began reading a few pages. Time melted away after an hour, her shoulders slumped, a yawn escaping her lips. She closed the book and walked over to the glass-encased shelf that held a delicate architectural model, one of Thames' award-winning projects. She touched the glass carefully, then with both hands lifted the miniature model to admire it. The office door opened, startled. Wine's fingers faltered. In a blink, the model slipped and crashed to the floor. Wine gasped, staring in horror at the broken pieces. The secretary strode in, saw the scene, and immediately shrieked. "Are you kidding me?" Wine stumbled back, trying to gather the pieces. "I didn't mean to." "You mean to, of course." "You didn't mean to." "Of course you didn't. You just exist doing things." The secretary snapped. "Why are you even touching anything? You're not fit to be here, embarrassing the boss every time you open your mouth or move your hand." Wine stood frozen, the harsh words slamming into her chest, while just then Thane also came and stood in the door with a frown. But no one noticed him. "You are a disgrace to the CEO," she spat. "You think just because you're his wife, you have some power. Look at you, what a joke. Now pick it up, clean it." Wine flinched and finally snapped. "Shut up. You think just because Mrs. Kim gave you this position means you get to talk to me like that?" She yelled, fists clenched. The secretary stepped forward and shouted her, "Don't yell at me, clean it." But before Wine could respond, Thames' voice, as cold as ice, rang out. "What's going on?" He tossed aside his suit jacket. Tie-loosened rage painted across every sharp feature. His dark eyes swept the room, landed on the shattered model, then on Wine trembling, and finally on the secretary. The secretary rushed to him. "Sir, she broke your model," she was yelling. All over her head, the staff outside were peeking in. Thames' eyes didn't move from the secretary. Then, without warning, he grabbed her by the throat. Everyone gasped. Thames' voice turned low and venomous. "Who are you to speak to her like that?" Mr. Kim," the secretary gasped, blowing up his fist. "Who gave you the right to touch her?" He hissed, his grip tightening. "To insult her, to lay a hand on my wife." Her eyes bulged, choking sobs leaving her mouth. The staff outside froze. Wine in a daze grinned at the scene and suddenly shouted, "Thames, stop, she'll die." His eyes snapped to Wine's tears-filled ones. He shoved the secretary hard. She fell to the ground, coughing and crying, hands around her throat. Then turned to Wine and protectively held her by the waist, his touch now soft, trembling with restrained fury. He turned to the staff at the door and said loud and cold, "Let me remind all of you, this is Mrs. Kim. If she burns this entire building down, you'll applaud her while it falls." He growled. Everyone stood frozen, terrified. "You'll treat her with the respect my name commands. Anyone who can't do that can leave." Not a single soul moved. Slowly, heads bowed, the staff dispersed. Someone helped the crying secretary off the floor. Then pulled out his phone with his free hand, bring the car. He told the driver. Then, without a word to anyone else, he turned and walked out, still holding Wine by the waist. She walked with him silently, her thoughts a whirlwind. He defended me like I mattered, but maybe he only did it to protect his image. Maybe I just embarrassed him again. They walked out of the building and sat in his car. The drive to home was in a blur. Thane remained silent beside her, while Wine's mind was a chaos. They just arrived home when Thane's phone rang and he sighed, answering it. "Mother." He muttered under his breath when then answered with a clipped yes. Wine sat on the sofa hard, already sinking. Thames brows furrowed immediately. Yes, I know what happened, he replied coldly. Wine couldn't hear the other end of the call, but it was loud enough to guess his mother was furious. Her voice echoed through the phone speaker in the silence. She is your wife. Do you have any idea what you have done? That girl is the daughter of my friend. You choked her in front of your employees because of her. Thames' voice dropped sharp and razor thin. She deserved worse. Mrs. Kim snapped him. He clenched his jaw and muttered, I don't care who she is. No one touches my wife. No one insults her, not even you. Wine shrank into the sofa, her chest tightening with shame and guilt. She bit her lip hard, trying to hold back the tears bleeding in her throat. Tim entered the call abruptly and exhaled, sitting beside her. He glanced at her hands shaking in her lap. Wine. He called softly. She didn't move. He scooted closer. What's wrong? He asked, though he already knew. She hesitated, then bit her lower lip, whispering, I'm sorry, I embarrassed you today. He turned to her fully, his brows pulling together. You didn't. She kept her head down, not believing him, so he reached out and tilted her chin gently, making her look at him. Wine's breath caught. For the first time, she truly looked into his eyes, into the storm of unspoken emotions, raw and unguarded. His thumb traced her cheek, wiping a tear that had slipped free. She leaned into his touch as if it healed something inside her. Her voice wavered. Your mom is mad at you because of me. I always embarrass you, and then you have to cover up for me. He shook his head slowly, his voice rough but sincere. No, I don't cover up for you. I defend you because you're mine. I don't care about the model. I don't care about what they saw. I only care that you stood there thinking you deserved that treatment. No one. He added firmly. No one used to insult you. Not in front of me, not behind my back, not even my mother. Her eyes widened with the weight of his words. Don't you get mad? She whispered. When I make mistakes? His lips curled into a slow, lopsided smile, eyes softening into honey. He pressed a loose strand of hair from her face and murmured, I fall harder every time you do something ridiculous. One flushed deep crimson. Her heart skipping. You like me, she stammered, his grin grew teasing, eyes gleaming. I'm obsessed with you, but it's a secret, don't tell anyone. She gasped softly. Really? But I always thought you just tolerated me. He held her hand and brought it to his lips, saying in a low voice, Ever since we got married, you have been hiding from me, scared of me. And I don't know how to say it or fix it. I'm not good with emotions or words, but I have wanted to get closer to you every day. She lowered her gaze, lips quivering. It's because of your cold face you always look like you hated me. I thought you deserved someone perfect like you. He let out a sigh and leaned closer, pressing his forehead gently to hers. I never said being perfect was what I needed. You brought noise into my silence, Wine. You brought warmth into my cool. I didn't even realize how painfully quiet this house was until I heard you laugh. Her heart stuttered. He cupped her cheeks, his thumb strolling lightly. I'm not perfect either. But there's one thing I'm sure of. It's that I never defended you for appearance. I did it because you're my wife and you matter more than anyone else, including my mother. She blinked through tears and murmured, But it was the first time your mom came over and I made so many mistakes. She can be upset, he said simply with a shrug. That's her problem, not yours. Then without warning, he grabbed her waist and pulled her into his lap. She gasped, hands flying to her chest, eyes wide. Tim, don't hide from me anymore, he whispered against her skin, his voice warm and firm. Don't think you are in my way. Her gaze dropped, her face burned as she murmured, I'm clumsy, awkward. He interrupted instantly, his nose brushing against her cheek. You're adorable, you're sweet, and you're mine. She let out a small, breathy giggle, burying her face into the crook of his neck. Her lips brushed lightly over his skin as she whispered, I love you, Tim. His entire body still, then she felt it, his arms tightening around her. His breath shallow against her ear. He pulled back slightly, cupped her face, and kissed her, not soft, not hesitant. It was consuming, deep, raw, like he had waited forever to feel her lips against his. Now that he had them, he refused to let go. Wine gasped, trembling against him, fingers tightening in his shirt, but Tim only deepened the kiss, one hand sliding around her neck, the other cradling her jaw, like she was precious glass. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, he smiled towards Van Husky. You're so shy, he kissed, and now she protested, softly, cheeks pulling. You are, and I love it. He grinned, she playfully hit his chest, and he caught her wrist, pulling her closer again. You should be confident, he whispered, resting his forehead against hers. You're Mrs. Kim, my wife, that comes with rice. Like what? She mumbled, still flustered. He trailed kisses along her cheek, down her jaw. Like cleaning my chair, my bed, my heart, and me. Wine's fingers curled around the collar of his shirt. He looked into her eyes once more. See this now. We'll work on us slowly. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. That's all I ever wanted. Wine's heart swelled as she nodded slowly. She didn't feel like a burden. She didn't feel like a mess. She felt like his cherished, wanted home.